Hi there, my name is Laura Lee Smith and I write fiction. In this video, I will tell you a little bit about my two novels, Heart of Palm and The Ice House, and also I'll tell you a little bit about the new book that I'm working on. I do have a longer video for the book festival in which I discuss storytelling, reading, writing, and the road to publication. If you're interested in any of those topics, I invite you to follow the links to the longer video. So check it out. Thank you for your interest. I live in St. Augustine, Florida, and both of my novels have ties to this area. My first novel is called Heart of Palm. It's a story about a family living in Northeast Florida. A lot of people have asked me where I got the idea to develop this particular story about this particular family. And I think that I usually come back to the notion that the book, believe it or not, was inspired by a house. My grandmother had a house very much like the house in which the family lives in Heart of Palm. It was a very quirky place, a big Queen Anne with loads of rooms and loads of secrets. I think I always wanted to write a story about that house. So I created a house very much like it for my first novel, and I started filling that house with people. And then I started giving them problems to deal with because, as I mentioned in the other video about the craft of storytelling, stories don't really get off the ground and characters don't really get into development until you start giving them things to do and problems to solve. So I had this huge, quirky old house and I started filling it with people. My family was called the Bravo family, and I started giving them some issues to deal with. The biggest of which was the loss of one of the children. Many years ago, an old friend of my husband's lost his brother, who was hit by a car and killed on a road very much like the road that leads into my fictional town of Utina in Heart of Palm. And that story always haunted me because I really can't imagine how a family could survive a tragedy like that. How do parents keep going after a child dies? I've been taught that writers should write about their greatest fears, about the things that keep them up at night. It was very difficult for me to write that part of the story as a parent, but I wanted to see what would happen if I handed a loss like that to the family in this book. I wanted to see if they could survive it. So, Heart of Palm is a family story about a large family, extended family, living in Northeast Florida in a town that looks very much like the real Palm Valley, although it's a fictional town near my hometown of St. Augustine, Florida. It's got some humor in it, and I guess I would describe it primarily as a family drama. It was a lot of fun. It was my first novel. I learned a lot about writing in the development of that book, and looking back on it, it was really one of the best experiences I think I've ever had as a writer, learning how to be a writer during the process of bringing a family to life on the page. It was eye-opening, and I hope you like the result. My second novel is The Ice House. I think of this book as my road trip book. The protagonist of The Ice House is a Scottish immigrant named Johnny. He's on a quest to make amends with his adult son, who is a recovering heroin addict. Part of the novel takes place in Florida, and part of it takes place in Johnny's homeland, Scotland. I think it's different from Heart of Palm in that it doesn't focus as much on a specific place, like the town of Utina, which I developed in the first novel. But it's similar in the way that it deals with family relationships and forgiveness, and in the way that I try to use humor to offset some very, very difficult issues like addiction and like family estrangement. So those seem to be the themes that I keep returning to in my fiction. I'm currently working on a novel set in St. Augustine, where I live. This novel is set on a fictional island in the Matanzas River. Again, it is focused on family. This family is trying to come to terms with a very complicated history and a very unsure future, which is actually a pretty vague description, come to think of it, but bear with me. This is a work in progress, and I'm learning as I go what this novel and what these characters are really going to be all about. It's place-based, the new book, perhaps closer to Heart of Palm than The Ice House in that sense. So those are my two novels. I also write short fiction, which helps temper the pace of novel writing, I have learned. A novel is a really big commitment. It takes years for me. It takes years of time and attention. So writing short fiction can be a very welcome respite and a very welcome time contained adventure in between those longer projects. Let me close with just an observation about fiction. In the other video that I posted, the longer video, I talked a bit more at length about storytelling and why it's important, why I think it's important. Once I was asked, why is fiction important? And I thought about that question for a long time, and it took me a while to articulate my answer, but I think it's important because storytelling is what we do. It's how we understand each other. If you think back to some of your earliest memories, you remember them in terms of story. We are attracted to fiction because it helps us understand our own behavior better. It helps us understand the behaviors of those around us better. I saw an interview one time with an animal behaviorist, and this gentleman said that the great apes, the reason that the great apes are so fascinating to us is because they're so intelligent that they very quickly master issues of food and shelter. And they spend the rest of the time that they have available to them simply driving each other absolutely crazy. I thought that was really funny because that's exactly what we do as humans. We have too much time on our hands. We spend that time driving each other crazy, and then we tell stories about it. You gotta love it. This is what brings us to books. This is what brings us to movies, to television, to drama, to music. We are, as I said in the longer video, we are a species addicted to story. And I, for one, can't get enough. And I know that that's what brought you to this book festival as well. So thank you very much for watching. Thank you for your interest in my work. I can only hope that we can do this book festival in person in 2022, and I have high hopes that we will be able to do so. So thanks again. Hope you're well. See you soon.